All right, Doka. So a very, very warm welcome to this conversation that we are going to have on the occasion of International Day of Education. And we have been following your work, your nonprofit's work, and it is really, really good. And we have been appreciating it a lot. And that is why we wanted to connect with you and try to understand more about this cause, more about how you work, how are you creating an impact in the lives of the beneficiaries that you're interacting with. And that is why this conversation, and thank you so much for joining in. And I'd like to kickstart this interview discussion with the very first question, and I think the most basic question that anyone can ask about this issue. Why is it a need to aware people about literacy, about education, even in the 21st century, when every single person, not single person, most of the world understand the relevance and importance of education in the lives of children?
Yeah, because honestly, people think and they take education for granted, but really it's not. It is for those who have it, they take it for granted. For the poor, they have a lot of gaps. And education plays a major role in one's development. So there is the part of education where you get without having to go to school, just socializing with people. That is the basic education that anyone gets. But for a more formal education, it gives you an outlet where you can actually sit and discuss ideas. So if you really have that, and you really have that that base where you can discuss ideas, it opens a lot of roads for you. Okay, you can do anything you want to do as long as you can vent it. You can make informed decisions. You can simulate better. You can understand other people better. You can understand why so and so does what and why so does things like that. So it's really an interaction besides, just learning, what science is. It's a way for people and kids to develop. So basically, it's the core of development. It structures what the world should be. And that's why I think it's a very important thing to do.
Thank you so much. I think I totally agree on that. And I love the perspective and the point of view that you see this issue from. And for this, I am even more intrigued about knowing how does Tender Grassroots and your work fit into this cause, and how do you actually impact the society?
Understand what Tender Grassroots does and what the impact we do, you got to understand where Tender Grassroots comes from. So we started Tender Grassroots when we visited where I come from. I'm originally from Uganda, and I am in the US. So I went to visit Uganda, and I visited one of the schools that I attended when I was a kid. And I honestly didn't like what I saw. So when I came back to the US, I said, this is something that we can improve on to have the kids have a better education. The school I visited has about 800 kids. And the classes were so crowded. The ratio for a teacher to a classroom was 1 to 48. So there is no way the teacher is going to do anything about that. If you looked, the textbooks they had, I'm telling you, there's 800 kids. A total number of textbooks the school had was 600. And that is a combination of math. That is when you put math, science, reading. That is, so how is how is that really gonna make a difference? So yeah, you had the kids in school, but the teachers had no supplies. So it was really sad. So I was like, this is somewhere where you can really make a difference. So that's how actually Tender Grassroots came about. So how are we making an impact? One of the things what we are doing, we are trying to bring places. For example, in the US, I've met with some of the schools here where they have all these excess books. So if they could donate those excess books or the books that they are no longer using, and they could donate those to those schools, so that would be one way to do that. So that would actually make a great impact. So instead of wasting that, they will have that. So that's one way of doing that. We are trying to get teachers, from the US and parts of the country that they can, volunteer to help the teachers on the other end. So that's another way we are trying to do that. All right, and we are trying to see, this is, hopefully it works. We are trying to do some fundraising. This school they have 0 computers in the school. In this age, you don't have nothing like that. So how do you expect, to progress? So those are some of this. That's where we came from. That's why we are doing what we are doing. So there are all these problems out there that we are trying to highlight. You go to another school down the road, and they have all that stuff. So there is no balance. And that's why we're trying to highlight that and help those that don't.
That is such a noble cause to support. And I would say that, yes, you and your nonprofit are addressing the issue at the grassroots level. And this is something that will be scalable, and that will be more sustainable in terms of that, because there are a lot of people who are trying to just address the surface issue, address the issue on the surface level, and that would not solve the issue on a long-term basis. But I think the way Tender Grassroots is contributing to this issue, the impact might be comparatively slower, since you are working on the grassroots levels, and we already have a long way to go. Although we have reached too far, but still we have a long way to go. But I think the solution here that you are approaching and your nonprofit is approaching is something very long-term and sustainable. So that is something really great about how you're working and how you're impacting the society. And Doka, I would like to here discuss about the COVID issue as well. Like, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit the entire world, every single person in some or the other way was affected by the pandemic. In every single country, every single state, and even in India, even in Uganda, even in US, everywhere. So I would like to understand from you that how was your nonprofit and your beneficiaries and everyone around you affected, and how did you cope up to those challenges that were brought in and by the COVID pandemic, and where are we standing now in terms of how we have dealt to all that pandemic situation and all the challenges that we faced due to it?
COVID really has affected us a lot, and what people should understand is Uganda is one of the countries that I think has hit the record. For the last 2 years, kids have not gone to school. So there's 2-year gap of basically no school. Schools were completely closed. So there's maybe 5% of those who could afford, the wealth, the top richest, who can afford, they got private tutors, but the other 95%, they have been home with no school, no online class, because they can't afford it, they don't have the access to it, they don't have internet. And in areas like the one that I'm servicing, they have no books, so they have actually not been reading. So like you have this whole group, this generation that has lost out. So what's going to happen to them? Are they going to go back 2 years? So if they were supposed to have been in the 4th grade, are they going to stay in the 4th grade? Or are they going to skip and go to the 6th grade and miss those 2 grades? So there is that issue. So there is that gap. So that is one question that is out there that we don't know what's going to happen to those kids. There is a huge fallout, especially if you look at girls, especially. They have grown. There is already a gap in education between girls and boys. So what's going to happen to those girls? Are they just going to get married and that's the end of it? There's been an increase in abuse, because the kids are now home, they have nowhere to go and nobody knows what is going on. So there is a lot of social and impact that we are not seeing today, but that we are going to see as time goes on.
This is actually very terrible to hear, because there are a lot of bad things going around, and I think something that COVID has pushed us into. And so I would like to understand here that how is your nonprofit contributing to this? And we all know about the issue, and the issue is more with the society and less with the beneficiaries and less with the people that we are serving. But I would like to understand from you that how is Tender Grassroots approaching to this issue, and moreover, how can society play a pivotal role in resolving this issue?
One of the things that we are working on now, as I told you, there is this gap of 2 years, is at the moment we are trying to come up with a program where those who think they cannot go back to the basic school, to pick up from where they are because they've lost this period of time. We are trying to form like a vocational program. So that can hopefully, we can't go back to school. We lost 2 years. We are too grown up, to catch up. So give them something like vocational programs, and hopefully, they can learn a skill and they can make a living out of that. One of the things that we did is we sent some books, to help those kids who didn't go back to school, and use this as a library. And that is actually one of the things we are trying to build, a library. So if anything happens again, at least we have a real good library. Even if they don't have books, they can have somewhere to go and read, or have somebody to help them with that. Try to set up a computer labs for those kids. So that's another thing we are working on. Unfortunately, funding is very hard right now. So for us, the small organizations, people really don't see, they don't want to invest in us because they are like, oh, you are so small, what are you doing? And they invest in the larger organizations, which unfortunately I think is very sad, because the larger organizations, half of their money goes on overhead. It does not reach the community. But if you invest to the small communities, 95 to 100% of that money goes into the community, and you see a really impact. And I hope somebody somewhere, realizes that, because, I think they will make more impact with what they give, financing the smaller organizations than the bigger organizations. So those are some of the things we are doing. And we have a lot of mentors in the ground, just talking to the young kids, try to make sure that they don't go astray. My organization has started a health center, for the people who have issues, whether it's mental or something like that, or they just feel they need to talk to someone. It's there. It's offering both primary care and other supportive care, just for the kids, to vent as an outlet.
I think I really appreciate the way you are handling this situation, because yes, things are bad, but there is always a silver lining, and that silver lining is created by your organization in the lives of all the people that you're serving. Because a library in this situation is something that would motivate at least those people who are actually willing to learn.
Yep.
and this will definitely motivate the families as well, because in such times a lot of people have lost their jobs as well, and families are financially weak, and when it comes to paying for the educational material and books and everything, they are unable to do, especially in the times of pandemic. And that is something really worrying thing about this situation. And I think Tender Grassroots is doing an amazing job. A library can be a great idea and great solution. I wouldn't say the definite solution which would end this thing, but at least resolve the stress that we are having currently due to the pandemic. So thank you so much, Doka, for doing that. And also here I would like to understand the role of the society as well, because it is a societal issue. It is an issue with the society as well, because be it education. So I would say that education and lack of education and decreasing rates of literacy is one of the ripple effects of a lot of issues. So I would say the women empowerment would be one issue. The gender biasness and gender discrimination would be an issue. And these kind of small issues ultimately have a ripple effect and ultimately lead to the lack of literacy, and especially deprived women class and deprived girls not going to school and dropping out of schools. So I think a lot of nonprofits which I connected with, they had shared with me this issue that when we compare the rates on the basis of gender, there are a lot many girls as compared to boys who are dropping out of the schools and leaving their education. So here I want to understand that as a society, what can we do to address this issue, and how can a person, let's say like me, or someone who is willing to come up and volunteer for a non-profit organization like yours, come up and support a non-profit organization to further their cause?
So our organization, everything we're doing is community based. So we have the community vested in. So and that is the contract. Actually, we have a contract with the community. We have the churches involved, we have the mosques involved, we have the schools involved, all right, and now we have the local government involved. So it is all community based. We meet, we get meetings, and we come up with what we are going to do. We all have to agree, and we all have to say, this is what we think the community needs. This is how we are going to go about it. Who is responsible for what? And everyone is held responsible for what they have to do. So that is how our organization is working. It's not me sitting here and saying, okay, I'm in the US and I think you guys don't have water, we'll give you water. That's not how it works. So we sit and say, okay, what do we think really is going to make a difference? And we do that. And when we identify the problem, so like recently, one of the things we identified was there was a young girl who was being abused by her uncle. All right, so somebody recognized that, and that was brought, in the meeting as part of, it was a Tender Grassroots meeting, and somebody said, I had that. That kid X was being, abused, but I have no evidence about it. So it's an open discussion. So we identify things like that. So we are able to, because we have the local government involved in that area, it was investigated, and we had support, someone who volunteered, a social worker, and that is being addressed. How can you help me? You can help me. There are different ways you can help me. You can help me by offering services to put us out there so people can understand what it is that we are doing. So like advertising us, that is great. You can help us by donating to us, and we use that money to put it out there to do those things we want to do. For teachers, nurses, doctors, social workers, anybody who thinks they have the time and they want to work as mentors to our support the teachers back in our organizations, that is great. For those who want to do a mission trip and want to go out there and see what is out there and see how they can help, that's great. We will take that help. And another thing we are doing is we are trying, there are different programs that we want to do. We don't have the manpower to do that. If we can have somebody who help us do the design, do the study, do the literature review, figure out how are we doing that. Schools will be great because then they use their students to do that. That will be awful. I mean, great. That will be a tremendous help. So those are all the things that we are looking. It doesn't necessarily have to be money. You can give us your time. You can give us resources. Lots of ways you can help. So any help I can get, I'll take it.
Wow. I think I totally agree with that. That what it requires to volunteer is the right intent at heart, and you will automatically find a way to support the thing that you actually believe in and from your heart. So I think being a part of Goodera, we consistently engage with our non-profit organizations, and every week we volunteer for one of our non-profit partners. And being a volunteer, I can totally understand, and it is not just the sense of giving back to the society, but I think it's a lot to take from that volunteering experience for a volunteer, because the joy, the sense of satisfaction that we get by volunteering is inexplicable and incomparable. And you cannot explain someone that I had this kind of an experience, it was lovely. It takes that person to actually volunteer and then experience that joy. So that is something that I can totally vouch for, and I'm totally on page with you. And with that, Doka, those were all my questions. Do you have anything else to share?
Yeah, and just to tell you, when you're talking about volunteering, and the one thing people don't understand, volunteering, not only like you said, you get satisfaction out of it, but you get an experience that you would never have gotten somewhere else. Because that experience lives with you for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
And it does change you. It does change the way you think about things. It's tremendous.
I'll tell you an instance I just recalled by what you said. There was a non-profit we connected with, and they said that they were connecting the volunteers to their beneficiaries. So they were into health sector, and they supported like small kids who were dealing with some chronic illness or some disease or any kind of thing. So what they did was simply connecting volunteers with those children. And one of the volunteer was going through a mental illness, and they were not in the right state of their mental health. And actually that volunteer got benefited through that volunteering activity. So it was not just a one-way thing, it got a two-way thing. The children suffering from illnesses and going to hospitals and going through all that trauma, they were getting relieved by connecting with a volunteer, and that volunteer in return got some mental stability of his own. And
that's right.
His mental health improved, and that is something actually very astonishing, and at the same time so joyful to hear even.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it changes you. Yeah. We take things for granted when we have them, You don't realize what you don't have or how good you have it until you deal with somebody else. And this is the lesson I give to my kids. It's like, you don't know how well you are or how unwell you were until you start. So they are all part of this, and they have, and it has changed them.